Hey, thanks for your response, man. I'm definitely open to the science. Um, I just want to point out though that there's like this whole other realm, which is the phenomenology of consciousness, whereas the scientists, the neuroscientists, they typically focus on um, the physiology, the brain, and that's important. And I'm very interested in seeing what they find. But there's also the other side of it, which is just describing what we could mean by this word consciousness as we experience it. Because, what is the operative definition of consciousness within the science that's supposedly trying to um, understand it or neurally correlate it? What is, if we're having this project called the neural correlates of consciousness, what is it that consciousness is being defined as? Um, and what is that definition based upon? And I think it would have to be based upon experience. And there is a tradition in phenomenology out of Edmund Husserl and Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty and um, Francisco Varela and Evan Thompson in more contemporary ages. But there's an attempt that's been made to try to understand the structure of our experience rather than try to derive it from the physics of the external world. So it's just a reverse of emphasis. And, you know, I've mentioned this in a couple other videos that you could also look to certain spiritual traditions like various sects of Buddhism. Um, and while leaving all the cultural baggage aside, just look at the meditative practice itself, the training of attention, and derive some great scientific benefit from the methods that have been produced um, for thousands of years. So that said, let's go into the science, and it is interesting that there are 100 billion neurons in the stomach. I think there's 40,000 or so in the heart, and the nervous system, peripheral, and central. It extends throughout the body. So it's weird that we are only consciously aware, whatever that means, of a portion of it. But I think, we do sometimes experience our stomach. What is hunger? And you do experience your heart when you're, especially agitated or emotional. You feel it in your chest, don't you? Um, so maybe our everyday rational self-image of who we are typically occurs in the brain. So the person who we think we are is what it feels like to be a brain, but the emotional being we become when we're provoked by the world is what it feels like to be a heart, or at least the emphasis is shifting, the focus of our conscious attention is shifting from brain to heart. And similarly, when we're hungry, all we can think about or feel is the hunger, and it just takes over everything else. So we're constantly shifting between deeper awareness of a different part of our body, and the rest of the body responds um, in relation to just this continual flow. And it's true that the brain is in a sense the core of this. It does seem to play a role in articulating how the rest of the body behaves, or at least the brain has more control over the other organs um, than any other organ has over the brain. So there's something significant about that. And this is all very ripe for investigation, certainly. Um, what I was really focusing on by trying to establish that neurons are experiential or sentient is really my attempt to solve the hard problem, which is a philosophical issue when trying to study or have a science of consciousness. Um, how are you going to get mental experience from purely physical phenomena? And the answer, I think, is to root the experience in matter. Otherwise, you're left with a bit of a problem. So it's a metaphysical issue that then kind of it throws new light on the science once we've established that sentience is a fundamental principle of matter. Uh, and I know it sounds crazy, but before you get the call to shut off your ears, just think about it. I mean, just think about it. So, you mentioned people that have some people only have two types of neural ganglion cells in their retina or retinal ganglion cells, and I'm one of those. I'm red-green colorblind, so some shades of red look green and vice versa. And it's interesting that color requires there to be a certain number of neurons. Otherwise, it just can't emerge. A single neuron doesn't see color. Neurons basically typically experience only other neurons. So that's what they sense. They feel each other. And by feeling each other, they give rise to what we call me. And we, too, apparently. It's, an interesting issue whenever you talk about consciousness is how do subjects relate? Because we may be thinking of this, if we're trying to see consciousness as somehow rooted in this particular body, we may be missing something or leaving something out once you take into consideration that never does, just like neurons don't exist individually, people don't exist individually either. There's never been one person, and typically when people are relatively isolated from other people, they go crazy. So people always are conscious together. And it just seems significant to me that maybe there's this connection that intersubjectivity is somehow more of a required aspect of consciousness than is the individual's brain or the individual subject. In the same sense that an individual neuron isn't going to do much. It takes a bunch of neurons to really be conscious. Same goes for an individual person. You talked about emergence a little bit, and you seem to be wanting to say that nothing really new emerges, and consciousness isn't this new property which emerges from a complex arrangement of neurons. It's just what they were always already doing. Right. That's what it is. It's just a little bit more of what they're already doing, and that's basically the pan-experientialist perspective. Emergence isn't something which takes you from nothing to something, from insentience to sentience. Nothing really new is created. No new ontological property of reality. At least no new ontological property. So I think you're moving towards my perspective a little bit, or maybe I'm just reading that into you for my own sake, but I don't know. I don't know at all. Let me know. But thanks for your thoughts, definitely. I'm liking where this is going. And don't be afraid to give me more science, man. I'll take the science. It's not a problem.